Hello! The Cyclopean walls, to be found all over the world, are built in different fashions and shapes, ranging from big boulders to the sharp angles, flat surfaces, and about everything in between. This variation in style is used by the mainstream as an argument to say separate walls are not related, i.e., that due to those somewhat different styles, different walls are not the work of the same peoples, nor even related cultures, neither during the same historical period. Which, on the surface, does seem to be a reasonable argument, except when that same logic is applied all upside down, by the same people arguing on the opposite idea. That double standard is demonstrated to the absurd with the three Cyclopean cities of Catalonia, in Spain, some beautiful and mysterious sites that official documents insist were all built in one take by the Roman, despite featuring not only different Cyclopean styles in the bottom, but also classical Roman works on top, creating some fusion masonry that defies all explanations. In the southeast of Spain, the region of Catalonia, we can find three different Cyclopean sites, or three locations with significant remains of Cyclopean walls, that are worth knowing about. One is in Tarragona, that features some very large and irregular blocks around the old city. The second one is Ollerdola, with a front wall made of stones with angled cuts and flat surfaces. And then the third, Empúries, that is a bit more complicated, with both soft and fitted polygonal blocks and also mid-sized boulders in different areas of the precinct. On top of this trio being located in Catalonia, what these walls have in common is that they are all attributed to the Romans and said to have been built with mixed styles, half Cyclopean, half Roman, in just one go. Well, having the Romans doing multicultural walls does not sound right, because the Romans were the poster child for OCD, having built an empire out of nothing else than obsessive repetition, leading us to suspect underneath these walls there is a Cyclopean mystery waiting to be revealed. The largest and most monumental of the three half-Cyclopean walls in Catalonia circles around the ancient city of Tarraco, nowadays Tarragona, a sleepy coastal town that in due time was the seat of the Roman provincial capital and the basis for their armies during the Punic Wars. The military importance of the Roman city is evident by looking at the height of the Roman work, exceeding 10 meters tall, plus a couple more added by the massive Cyclopean blocks underneath. The Cyclopean bit is a thing of wonder, with massive boulders piled sometimes to heights of 5 meters and many doors all around the city, supported by humongous lintels. Although academic sources say the wall was built from scratch in this mixed style by the Romans during the 3rd century BC, that is clearly an absurd proposition, since it is evident that the Romans complemented a much older and already damaged wall, made out of massive blocks of the, let's say, Phoenician style. Around the Mediterranean, there are several hundreds of Cyclopean walls, each one mysterious on its own. Extra so if they are banded by their respective styles or methods of construction. This is the case of what could be called the Phoenician style of Cyclopean construction, referring to a type of wall composed of massive boulders, such as we can see in Cephalo, Sicily. Phoenic, Albania. Arwad, Syria. And also Tarragona in Spain. It is not impossible that all these monster walls were built by the same people, but I doubt the builders were the so-called Phoenicians, or at least not the ones living in Carthage, because there are no Cyclopean walls of any type in Carthage. And also, by the time the Romans kicked out the Carthaginians from Tarragona, that big boulder base was already very much destroyed, as seen by the different heights the big blocks reach. If the boulders were, as suggested by academics, a foundation built by the Romans, the whole thing would have the same height all around, and not sometimes one stone tall and others with 5 or 6 piled up, thus suggesting, actually proving, that the Cyclopean not but big and brute boulders are much older and not Roman, as we should expect of any Cyclopean wall. The second Cyclopean city with a mixed wall is to be found 60 kilometers up the coast, on a plateau with commanding views all around. Not only the views are nice, the site looks easily defendable by a short wall of 200 meters from cliff to cliff on each side. So much so, this convenient wall has been built and rebuilt by many people, starting with some fine polygonal bits of sharp angles and flat surfaces, made by God knows who, but said by the experts to have been the Romans, at the same time they were doing Tarragona. Fast forward over 1,000 years, after the Punic Wars and the Frankish turned Catalan Count of Barcelona decided to build a medieval castle on that same site, having then, arguably, completed the old wall with a variation of the original polygonal blocks, very similar visually, except that the medieval bits use smaller stones and are reinforced with cement. To make things worse, recently, beginning around the 1960s, the regional government committed several stages of, let's say, preservation, whereas the old Cyclopean wall and the newer medieval castle became nearly indistinguishable due to the extensive use of paint and concrete. The result of all these remakes is a dogat, not a dog, neither a cat, something in between, obscuring the unique example of a Saturnian-style Cyclopean wall outside of Italy. Central Italy is one of the hot spots for Cyclopean walls due to the magnificent Saturnian cities such as Alatri, Amelia or Cosa, all blessed with breathtaking Cyclopean citadels, built in a distinctive style of large blocks, sharp angles and polished surfaces, just like the ones we can nearly see in Ollerdola, underneath the repair work. Although academics say those Italian walls were built in the 5th century BC by a motley crew of unrelated tribes, from the Etruscan to the Samnites and including the Romans. The Romans themselves called these walls Saturnian, for being built for the mythical king Saturn, way back before then, i.e., in the Bronze Age. For its looks, the original wall in Olordola can be called Saturnian, making for an impossible dilemma on how dozens of walls of the Saturnian style covered all central Italy, except in Rome, plus just one case in Olordola, Spain. I don't know. And since we are adding to the mysteries and not to the solutions, it's worth noticing there is a solitary knob in one of the taller stones, a mysterious element of decoration that I'll have to do a video about. As if we hadn't already taken more than we can carry, the third Cyclopean city is at least twice as complex as the other two. In Empuris, near the border with France, we will find not only split walls but cities divided. The older part by the sea is said to have been established in the 6th century BC as a port for some Greek colonists coming from Phocaia, in what is today Turkey, a non-Cyclopean city in an area with plenty of nearby Cyclopean walls. The Greek port prospered, and the colonists built a bunch of buildings and statues and tombs and other stuff, all behind the wall of the bouldery Cyclopean type. At least that wall is not said to have been built by the Romans, but that is only because the Roman excuse is reserved for a much more complex setting. Just 200 meters inland from the Greek city there's a Roman one, built around the 2nd century BC. The Roman city of Empuris is typically Roman, with baths, forums and whatnot, built in the typically Roman way with concrete and bricks and mosaics. What stands out is the wall. Half of that is Cyclopean at the bottom and another half Roman concrete at the top, plus two other styles of construction sandwiched in between, some small bricks and also some mixed stones. It is all so confusing, I'd better let you see for yourself. We are told that this Frankenstein wall was made by the Romans in a short sequence of a few decades, because we common folks are not meant to expect logic from the experts. Otherwise, we might point out that the Cyclopean walls in Empuris, both of them in the Greek city and in the Roman one, are remarkably similar to the works in Mycenae. Mycenae in Greece was the original Cyclopean location, with the only walls ancient authors said were built by the one-eyed giants, unlike all the others that got that title as a nickname. The walls in Mycenae offer a jumble of different styles, ranging from the crude assembly of various sizes of stones to well worked out and slightly puffy polygonal work, similar both to the Greek and Roman sites in Empuris. The trouble is that Mycenae was built over a long time, about 1,000 years before the Phocian colonists established themselves in Spain, leaving us with a millennium gap in the timeline. On the other hand, considering that, just like Mycenae, Empuries were several styles of wall assembled and reassembled, having that extra time to build all the variations should be welcomed. Meaning, if the Frankenstein wall in Empuries was not built all at once by the Romans, but had existed since the Bronze Age and was rebuilt over that time, we would not be surprised by the mix of fashions. Merely 20 kilometers south of Empuries, we find Ulastret, a place blamed for the patchwork in the walls of Empuries, via a tale that stinks of fantasy. Officially, Ulastret was an important town for the local population of Indicats, some random tribes that made the crucial error of joining forces with the Carthaginian against the Romans. In normal circumstances, the Romans would have reduced the place to ashes and made an example out of the inhabitants. But no, we are told the Romans decided to handle these rebels with a cunning plan of retreating to Empuries on the other side of the river, building in there a wall of many colors to leave everyone and his cat very confused. This tale of nonsense, whereas the Romans forgave a defeated foe, is debunked by the non-Cyclopean nature of Ulastret. Likewise, all the other 20-odd similar native cities around, in Catalonia. All of them built with mortar to hold the stones, and wrongly attributed to the Iberians. See, the Iberians were a Cyclopean people, whilst the inhabitants of Ulastret, the Indicats, were not Cyclopean. They were, let's call them, dragons. The Iberian style of Cyclopean walls from the Iberos in the south of Spain near Cordoba is not very consistent, mostly including large blocks roughly assembled. But there's more to being a Cyclopean builder than just enjoying stone puzzles. The Cyclopes were a culture, and as such they shared other cultural aspects of relevance, such as the way they handled their dead. All Cyclopean builders practice inhumation from the Iberian Peninsula into Georgia. All Cyclopean peoples would put their dead intact on the ground. Whilst many non-Cyclopean invaders, including the Indicats in Catalonia, the people that crashed the party and terminated Cyclopean buildings in Western Europe, not only used mortar to secure their stones, many of them were cremators. They burned their dead, thus the nickname the Dragons. I just can't get to terms on why academics ignore this fact of the way dead relatives were honored, since the only certainty we have about those peoples is that in the past is that they are all dead, and often there is nothing more to see than their burial grounds. So, the Iberos in around present-day Cordoba would bury their dead intact, whilst the Indicats around Barcelona would burn them. They barbecued grandpa. Iberos and Indicats are not the same. Iberos are Cyclopes, Indicats were not. Confused yet? You'd better be. The experts tried their best to leave us puzzled with their proposition that these three mixed Cyclopean sites were made in a single go by the Romans, whilst trying to be more inclusive of the betraying local tribesmen. This mainstream proposition that the three walls were made all in one go by the Romans is obviously absurd, but we have to admit there is no clear alternative. it is easy to conclude the Indicates had nothing to do with the Cyclopean walls. They built Ullastret and all the other native cities around in a non-Cyclopean way, using mortar. Also, their dead bodies were cremated, which is a telltale sign that those people were not Cyclops. Now, if the three Cyclopean walls were of one same style with Roman or anything else on top, we could guess there was an ancient Cyclopean culture in the region that was replaced by the Indicates first and then by the Romans. But those three walls are very different from one another. They leave us without any simple explanation. The Cyclopean bases have respectively the Phoenician, Saturnian and Mycenaean styles, and this could mean an unlikely sequence of unrelated events, something like this. Each city began its story as a colony of a different incoming Cyclopean tribe that imported its own look and feel for their walls. But then, that is not very convincing also, since the reason Cyclopean styles exist in regional clusters of dozens of walls of similar look and not in isolated cases is because Cyclopean walls require a lot of work and skill to be built, demanding a large committed workforce that would not fit on a boat. The Cyclopean walls are built in large similar groups by pre-existing populations and not in individual cases done by visitors. For that reason, the three mixed styles of Catalonia will remain a mystery. Here's the thing. There is no thing, no conclusion to be made. Individually, the mixed styles in each city wall are representative of different epochs, with a clearly Roman work placed on top of an older and damaged Cyclopean base. What we cannot make sense of is how each Cyclopean wall got to be so different from one another. Who built them and when? Was it a sequence of events with different Cyclopean builders driving by at different times? Or were the builders mimicking fashions from all over the Cyclopean Sea? I don't know, and we did not even get to talk about the nubs, neither the simpler one in Olerdola, nor the more, let's say, explicit in Empuris. Maybe next time. That's it for today. Hope you liked it. See you in the comments.